Welcome back, looters. This is going to be a special sort of Q&A session where one of our friends slash teacher slash mentor asked me a bunch of questions that were really good questions, but I didn't want to throw them into the concept episode because it was already getting kind of long and editing is difficult. So this is a special edition of us answering some questions more in the vein of concept and working through the process of board games. Question number one is, how did you come up with the idea for your game, and what were the iterations that it went through? We already kind of talked about that with Candy Squad in terms of where the idea came from. The iterations were real fast. Like, we went really quickly. We split up the work between you took the player characters and I took the it's a cooperative game, so the world is sort of working against you. So I took the world elements.
Yeah, you took the villains.
Yeah, that's basically the world element is like the villains and possibly
and
events.
What the characters were. So it's like I took the characters of because it was a deck builder, and so I took the concept of let's say we have a character who's a knight, and so is this still a knight?
Yeah, she's still a knight.
She's still a knight. I took the concept of what would it be to be a knight. You'd have probably a lot of strength and just, of building a deck based on the concept of what would a knight do and how would a knight behave. And I made the alpha decks of the characters as to just what would they have? They'd have a lot of cards that do this, and they'd have not as many cards that do that.
Right.
And at the same time I was doing that,
I took the concept of the villains, which the first villains are going to be aliens, and so I thought I had to think about how could you defeat me in a way that was interesting and unique while still thinking about a win condition. So instead of us doing it all together, we actually split it just in half, which was an interesting way of doing it, but it kind of worked.
And you took the items?
I also did the items,
Yes, you took the items,
the viable items.
The viable items.
We kind of hashed those out together, but so version one was sort of, I came with the villains and I went, here's what I'm thinking, and you came with the players and you said, here's what they're gonna do, and we kind of tried to cobble together.
And we actually, it was playable. It
actually was.
We were just like, oh my gosh, that semi-worked. Okay.
So iteration one was very successful, but the one thing that did change immediately was you had a round tracker.
Yes.
That was sort of the win/lose condition. That would, instead of people taking damage, it would go forward on this tracker. And we decided very early on that the tracker did not work. It just was really fiddly to keep track of, and we would never remember to keep track of it. And so we pretty much scrapped that immediately and just changed the win/lose condition.
Another thing we decided really quick on together in these conversations was this concept that the board would be modular. And one of the nice things about that was because immediately we're like, this needs to be expandable.
Right, we jumped ahead.
We totally jumped ahead.
Kari wants to do all the time.
So consequently, that was one of the early decisions, was to make the board modular.
Yeah.
And so hence we went from, we need a board to, we just need we only need what we need just to make this particular game.
Right.
And we only need as much pieces.
And that's actually a really good tip, is to with the starting small and stuff, start with as few pieces as you need, because if you need to add more, that's okay. Yeah. But paring back, at one point, the board took up the entire kitchen table, and Kari's table's really big. So when we went to play it and things didn't really fit on this giant board, and she's like, we need to make the board bigger. I was like, oh my God. At that point, you're in too far. it's really hard to pull back once your board takes up the entire table. And I don't have a kitchen table. I have a coffee table. And so trying to put this giant board on my table to play test it at my apartment did not work. The cat would jump up on it and the board would flip on him, and it was a mess. So starting small and paring down what you need to be the smallest is very important. I don't know that the game has really changed that much in terms of look, other than the board went from small to really big to really, really big, and now back to small with a sideboard. But in my other game that I am working on that is almost done, the game has changed a lot, where it started out with an extra deck of cards that we cut because it just wasn't necessary. We changed it from having multiple, it was like 3 or 4 actions on your turn down to 2. And the reason that those changes normally was made was to keep it easy for the players. The players couldn't maintain that much knowledge they couldn't maintain that much knowledge and make good decisions with that many choices in front of them. So keep it easy for your players and make sure that they have everything that they need to make good decisions.
And the other reason it got cut was the fact that you don't have is that every extra piece is also stuff that's going to also have to be marketed and has to be produced,
paid for,
and paid for,
yeah.
And then the customer has to pay for it, which means if it's not helping the game,
it's costing you money.
It's just costing money,
right?
And so, why?
Who wants to pay for a board the size of your kitchen table? No one has time for that.
So the answer is, we trimmed the fat.
Exactly. Yeah. So most of the iterations of that game actually pared back things.
Oh yeah, that's not what you did.
Every time.
And then what you would do is every time is you would try it with something trimmed. You'd be like, I don't know, we need this.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it without it. And then in the end, if the answer was it
didn't help.
It didn't help and it played, you always trimmed it.
Yep. What reasoning did you use for picking one idea versus abandoning another one? So, fun fact, when we started this whole journey, we each had sort of a game that we wanted to make. Neither one of those games are a game that we are currently working on at all. They both went onto the shelf and we never spoke of them again. So why did we decide to work on Candy Squad versus Hoffa? I think my answer is just, I really like Candy Squad and I didn't really like that other game. I wasn't excited to play it all the time.
That was the thing. It's like, it's not that Hoffa it wasn't a game that wasn't playable. It was totally playable.
Yeah, it was totally playable.
And it was fun, but it wasn't something that we were wanting to play a lot.
And over and over again.
And it's just a situation of it being in our wheelhouse or not in our house. So Hoffa is a party game.
Which is hard for us in general, because there's normally 3 or 4 of us. And now there's COVID, which makes it really, really hard to have a party game that you're working on.
Whereas we both love deck builders.
We like specific deck builders. We've played some deck builders that I don't like very much.
But the deck builders we liked, so there's essentially almost like 2 kinds of deck builders. There's the deck builders where everyone plays from the same tree, and then each person tries to make their own flavor of fruit off that tree.
More of a cooperative deck.
And then there's the deck builders where everyone picks a character and tries to build their best character.
And you're still talking about cooperative. We pretty much only play cooperative games here. There's also competitive deck builders like Dominion.
Well, and for me, Dominion was like my first pile, which was everyone plays from the same
group of stuff.
And if you want to buy nothing but one particular type, you can
moats.
Moats. I need more. Lots of moats.
All the moats.
I know. I'm going to take all the moats. And so, consequently, we don't like that set. We like the other set where everybody picks a thing and be like, I want to be the fighter, and then picks all the cards that would help them as a fighter or a mage or whatever.
We want to be a unique and special
I'm a unique snowflake even though I'm pulling out of the same deck, I'm only buying the mage cards. And so, by the way, I don't know there's such a game as that.
Well, we did try one at one point. I didn't like that one either. I won't name names, but we've played a lot of deck builders to sort of give us inspiration, but also to decide what we did and didn't like. If there's like a shared store, did we like that? How did that impact our game? Having to deal with events, how did we like that? How do we deal with that in our game? So what makes you want to abandon an idea? For me, it's just if it isn't working very well and I have other games. Like if something is working kind of well, but it's difficult, that's okay. But back to the analogy of round peg, square hole, if it's really, really hard and it doesn't come naturally, there are other ideas. We have lots of too many ideas, some might say.
I'm good at coming up with ideas.
Way too many ideas, some might say. Whole
sheets.
Why would I waste, I don't even want to say waste time. Why would I spend a lot of time on this idea that's really not coming along organically when I do have this other game that I am really excited about and that did come together or is coming together really, really quickly and easily, and things just kind of fall into place. So that's sort of my decision making, is if I can intuit how the design is coming together naturally, that's what I want to work on, because it makes sense and frankly is more fun to design a game that sort of just falls into place. You feel really smart and it's more fun to play because you already know sort of what you need to do with it. So that's my answer. What makes you want to abandon a game?
I usually have so much time.
That's true, and you like to fill your time with lots of things.
Lots of games. I can dish out lots and lots of ideas for games very quickly.
Like if there's a clock in the middle.
And you turn it.
Next is, what ideas did you table or cut from the design and why? We already kind of mentioned that.
Oh, one thing we tabled, and this is a real table, is there was a round in Candy Squad where you could buy an item and you could choose upon purchase if you were going to equip the item or if you were going to
put it into
your deck, in which case you'd play it. And if you equipped it, it wasn't as great, but you got to use it every round.
Right. As opposed to being in your deck where it's better, but you only get it once every 3, maybe 4 hands.
Right. And we actually didn't cut it. We tabled it.
That's true, because we have a character that might
work
really well with that mechanic specifically.
That would be a great character in the future.
That's true.
Is a character who
can equip stuff.
Sits there and that's what they do, is equip stuff.
So
that is their thing, is to do nothing but sit there and equip things.
Right. So the idea was players weren't remembering that they could equip things, and so they were just buying it and putting it into their deck anyway. So it was an unnecessary mechanic. But if that is all the character's special ability is, they will be more likely to remember to do that and take full advantage of it, because that's the thing that they can do that's better than other characters.
And so that's the one interesting thing about our game, Candy Squad, is it's a very strange deck builder in the fact that we have characters who aren't really deck builders, whose
thing
powers
isn't really a deck builder.
Aren't really a deck builder. We have some characters who are 100% deck builders, like, I'm a deck builder. We have others that aren't, and so it's
a unique take.
So it's an interesting take on a deck builder.
Yeah. What motivated the choice you made about what to keep in the game? It worked.
Yeah.
That's a really lame answer.
I mean, a lot of this game worked right out of alpha.
Yeah. I feel like, so there are some things that we did change, such as at one point we had the currency in the game is candy. It's called Candy Squad. The currency is candy. Don't at me.
That was early.
At first we weren't sure whether we wanted candy to be a physical representation that you could take out of a pile in like pieces that you could collect in front of you, or if it was going to be something more nebulous where, like, in most deck builders you say, oh, I play this card, this card, and this card, and that gets me 4 candy.
Yeah.
And you use it or you lose it. And so we kind of went back and forth because honestly I'm not a huge fan of the idea of use it or lose it in games. It makes it feel kind of crappy when you're like 1 away and you're like, I'm so close to being able to buy this card, but I don't have enough.
Yeah.
And each turn you're like so close. And so we played with the idea of having pieces that had candy and you could just like gather them and store them. But the problem was then people would kind of abuse it almost, where you would just like stockpile all of the candy and then be like, I will pay 20 candy for this. And so we kind of split the difference, actually. Yeah. We put in a type of card where if you didn't have enough for something, you could buy this card for 2, and it would either let you get rid of it for 2 candy, or you could discard it to draw a new card. And so it was kind of like a storage, but built in a way that was more unique that you could take advantage of in the actual deck builder itself.
And one of the concepts that we were thinking about with the candy, and why we kind of wanted to do physical candy, of something you could actually keep and
because we like candy.
Well, was also because if these are trick-or-treaters, then one thing you could be doing is going, like, you might have a mechanic or something where you go to houses and get trick-or-treat. You trick-or-treat.
By the way, Candy Squad is a game about trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
We didn't say that before. We're going to give you tidbits sprinkled in as we go,
and
where
so,
you get to determine what this game is based off of our clues.
And so consequently, that might be an interesting mechanic, if that you could choose to, I want to play or I want to try to gather candy.
Right. Waste, sort of, I don't want to say waste, but like use your turn to gather resources for later use rather than for right now.
And that is one concept we kind of did abandon, is this concept of that, because now you can just get
the trick-or-treat card.
But there is also ways in the game that you can actually have it be a thing where for some reason you are acquiring those
more trick-or-treat
cards.
Yeah. So it actually worked out better, I think, because it's become a mechanic in of itself where it's a new type of card that we can utilize for other things. So like certain characters can just give their friends a trick-or-treat, meaning like, I went trick-or-treating, guys, and here's some candy. And you can share it with your friends that way because it's in a physical card form that is easier to manipulate than making 10,000 tiny pieces you have to add into your game. And that's the other thing too, is if we wanted to have it be chits, which are like tokens, how many of those will we need to include to make it enough versus cards, which we're making a ton of anyway because it's a deck builder.
Yeah.
And doing like 1 sheet of cards would probably be cheaper than 100 pieces of cardboard. So in that sense too, it made a lot of value.
And with it being the cards, also, it's because each character and potentially each expansion because, okay, that's the other thing, is each expansion is going to have like a different kind of story.
Yeah.
And so for some stories, having, those cards may go fast. You'd be like, everyone's got tons of them in their hands and they're shuffling them because maybe
a new mechanic.
Yeah, maybe to defeat this bad guy, maybe you have to maybe he's gluttonous and you have to give him candy for him to go away.
Right.
We don't have a villain like that, but
yet.
Lots of ideas. So
patent pending. Copyrighted. Loot and loot.
So, and if that's the case, then we would just be reusing the same cards that is just part of the base game.
Right. So I think that's all the questions Adam had for us. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of knowing when to keep ideas, knowing when to cut ideas, anything along those lines?
No, I mean the one thing I would just warn people about and think about is when you're building your game, when you're building your game or whatever,
round mechanic that turns.
it turns, is you may have another game that you've abandoned that you realize that if you could take those two pieces and put it in, and it's a way then of fully abandoning the game that you've already shelved, but getting those two pieces that you really liked about
as long as they work with it, and like we said, you don't want any fat in your game.
No
you
fat.
Don't want anything extra that is unnecessary.
Like in the mechanic thing, now there's boats, and what it's doing is it shifts the oceans.
Tidal waves. It's making
Tidal waves.
That's
it's making waves. It's pushing the boats out in the giant clock in the middle.
Right. I would also say that games tend to go in sort of cycles.
Oh, true.
So a mechanic could be really popular for a while. There were a bunch of legacy games popping up, and now there are like none. Or there will be a bunch of themes that sort of go in cycles too. So like last year, there were a lot of bug and animal games are still kind of popular,
yeah.
But like in a very, not like cute cats and dogs, but like more obscure animals. And so think about why those are popular. You can ride the wave, but game development normally takes about like 2 years at the least. So will you still be on trend if all you're trying to do is ride the trend by making a game?
No.
So think about maybe if you have a theme in mind. The other thing that I did not mention that is really important is if you want to sell your game to a publisher later, which is not where we're going with this, but we'll talk about it on one of the weeks
later. Yeah.
If you want to sell your game to a publisher, they will probably not like your theme anyway. And not to be like they won't like your theme, but in a way of they will look at it and maybe your theme is good, but they have something that they really want to put in their catalog. Oh, here's a game about roller coasters, but like, okay, we already have a game about theme parks, so we're not going to do it as roller coasters. We're going to turn it into a game about spaceships because we don't have a space theme game yet. Or it could even go the other way around where they're like, can we make it about spaceships because we really like spaceships and that's our brand, is like a bunch of sci-fi things. So I would say unless your mechanics and your theme are like married and very, very tied to each other, don't worry too much about the theme if you want to sell it to a publisher, because chances are it will not be the same once you sell the rights to it. So that's all I have about this Q&A. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you learned some stuff from us talking randomly about things turning and tidal waves. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below here or on episode 2 of Let's Make a Game, and we will answer those next time, assuming we get any questions. I had to beat people up to get these ones. Not really. I did not actually say that. So next time we'll be talking about prototyping and what it looks like to actually build your board game. So if you have any questions about that, or if you have any follow-up questions about concept, feel free to ask them below in the comments. Thanks.